How many people are behind the bars or they are sacrificing their families and wives because of the autocratic regimes? And liberals can play an important role in fighting for freedom, for liberties, for justice, rule of law. Allow me to thank you once again for being shoulder to shoulder with us in this fight for many decades. And many more will come because we have you, members of ALDE party, dedicated political activists, freedom fighters, politicians, and we all want to change Europe for better. Dear friends, welcome to the third Hans van Baalen Town Hall meeting on the future of Europe, this time in Rome in cooperation with Più Europa. Thank you. Thank you for your assistance, but also thank you, Emma and dear friends, for your strong contribution on the conference on the future of Europe. We are very happy to see you here with us in the hall and online. It's great to see many people who want to discuss and shape the liberal future for better. Today's meeting adds to a series of town hall meetings named after ALDE Party's late president Hans van Baalen that ALDE Party has hosted over the past months and will continue to do in 2022. Hans was very passionate about this topic, and these town hall meetings are also part of his legacy. The main goal of the town hall is to truly put European citizens at the center of the debate and bring them closer to conference by giving them the opportunity to share their vision, their thoughts and ideas on how they see the future of Europe. We are all here to talk, but mostly to listen you, your proposals, your ideas, your commitment, and your dedication for your project. And that's why we are here to discuss how we can make it more efficient. European citizens like European Union, but they want to see it more effective in working for them, be it on global level, but be it on national and local level. There is a need for change because European institutions are not designed for 21st century. They are designed rather to 20th century, but we live in different realities. We live in realities where rule of law is challenged every day, where freedom and liberties and NGO activism is shrinking in many countries. We live in realities where we have to compete with global powers, just to name some of them, Russia, China, US. And for that, we need to change European project, to make it more efficient, to make it more understandable for its own citizens. A conference on the future of Europe has given us a good opportunity to start a discussion. Of course, we count on European Parliament, and we know what the European Commission and what the European Council will say. But also we want to have our vision, liberal vision, how to change Europe, how to give hope to hopeless, how to make European institutions more efficient, and how they can deliver to us, to the citizens. This was my initial remark. Please allow me now to welcome the co-host, my colleague and friend, Timmy Dooley, ALDE Party Co-President. And after that, Timmy, you invite Emma Bonino. Thank you. Please, Timmy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ilhan. And thank all of you who have journeyed to be with us today. It certainly is nice to be back in a room with more than a screen or a microphone, that there's actually real people physically in front of us. It's been some journey this past 2 years. It's been a challenge to all political parties in attempting to come together to continue with our work, develop our policies, and take on the next chapters. But there are immense learnings, which I'm sure we'll talk about over the weekend in this hybrid conference. I'm really pleased to be welcoming you to this, the Conference on the Future of Europe event here in Rome. And I'm particularly pleased that the ALDE Party took a decision to name these town hall meetings after our dear friend Hans van Baalen, It's a fitting tribute to him and for the work that he did on behalf of liberalism, on behalf of political parties, on challenging those that had sought to go against the rule of law that had become such a fundamental aspect of everything that we believed in. He did that in domestic politics, he did it in European politics, he did it in Liberal International, he did it on the world stage. And it's a really, I suppose, a relatively small thing that we're doing in his honour and memory, but it's an important one. I'm looking forward to the debate, particularly to hearing from our good friend Guy Verhofstadt. We're really thankful for being with us this afternoon. He has, yet again, on top of many important roles throughout his political career, taken on a really important role at this time, that of one of the co-presidents of the Conference on the Future of Europe. And I have every expectation that he will raise the challenges as he has done in the past, and will come forward with an appropriate set of proposals. Because quite frankly, we have gotten too used to the European project as it exists. Sadly, too many people have. Not enough has been done to challenge the attacks on the rule of law, particularly in countries like Poland and Hungary. Attacks on the free operation of media, the approach taken to the judiciary. These are issues that are fundamental to what we should believe in as Democrats, let alone liberal politicians. So I think at this particular time, because of the way in which political ideologies are changing to some extent, and because of that retrenchment towards some level of nationalism, and it's been a challenge for us now for some time, but has been exaggerated in recent times. Never before was it more important for the outcome of this conference to really shake things up, try to recenter around the aims and objectives and the expectations of our citizens and our voters. That's a big challenge, no doubt about it. But I think that we have the people on board who can guide us through that, who understand citizens and have done so for a very long period of time, and who recognize the tremendous benefits that membership of the European Union brings. Coming as I do from Ireland, small country on the periphery of Europe, we have seen how that retrenchment towards nationalism has impacted on our country, not by our voters, but by the actions of our nearest neighbours. May not necessarily have been a straightforward or a truthful campaign, but it was a campaign that was won. And that's where we've got to be careful about having a free media, a media that's not influenced by the political elite within any country. And there's nobody questioning democracy in the UK, but we saw whereby a campaign was hijacked by certain sections of the media with willing participants and agitators within a political process that was not to the benefit of their citizens, I might suggest, but certainly not to the citizens of my country or many other countries in Europe who had a close working relationship. So I'm looking forward to the presentation today and to the further outcome of the work that the conference is doing. It gives me great pleasure in Rome to call on Emma Benedetto to come forward now and offer a local welcome, a true Roma welcome, a true Italian welcome. Emma.
Sì, sì. Buongiorno. 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 No, I understand that the weather outside is not, let's say, it's gray, sad. And I'm sorry for you, because Rome is beautiful normally. But yes, we are powerful, but not so much as to book good weather for your visit. We send faxes everywhere to provide sun, and nobody listens. Same discussing Europe. You can discuss, and nobody answers. Now, in any case, my very, very warm welcome in Rome, in a good time, meaning in a difficult time. But that is just the difficult times where it's needed to meet, to continue to dialogue, even when we can imagine are a little bit useless. It's not true. In any case, I stick with the sentence of all the great person who said once, Europe has been a dream for the few. It has become the reality for the many. It will become a necessity for all. We are in the many. And if it has to become a necessity for all, depends also on us. Not only, but also on us. Sometimes Europe makes me sad. But then looking around, I see nothing better. And so I accept, with the promise myself to make it better as much as possible. Can I tell you how ashamed I am, and I was, when I saw a few thousand refugees from Belarus stopped by Poland with ferry. I was really ashamed. In the cold, no food, no medicine, no assistance. So we have a continent of 500 million people. The most developed country, not only in terms of PNB, but in terms of social security, pensions. Look around. That doesn't exist in China, doesn't exist in Africa. Unfortunately, it doesn't even exist in the US. In Europe, it's there. Maybe a little bit obsolete, maybe it should need a reset, but definitely from all this point of view, we are lucky to be here. And these 500 million people are letting few thousand desperate migrants die in the cold. For me, it's unacceptable. And I think that if Europe is a land of value, not a word of value, if Europe is a land of value, these things are unacceptable, like letting people drowning in the Mediterranean, or even worse, trying to save them only to bring them back in Libya and under torture, lager, etc., etc. It brings me just to say that Europe is our destiny, I agree, but it needs improvements. Democracy is one of these systems which is not the perfect one. Churchill said, as you know, is the worst one compared to all the others. But we are losing the sense of humanity. This is what I think I wanted to, because Guy, I hope you can give me some hope on the conference going on Europe. I must confess that I'm not exactly over-optimistic. Not because the items to be discussed are not important, but there is one item for me extra important, which is lacking totally, which is the institutions. And if we don't address the question of the unanimity, for instance, or of the lack of capacity of proposal from the European Parliament, and we stay continually like we are, I think we have not understood where we are living and where we will live. That's why. And not because I am a good person also. I am a good person, by the way. But in my country, sometimes it's said to a kind of visionary somebody living on the moon that doesn't have the sense of reality or the political realism. Forget it. It's not me. I understand very well the geopolitical, strategic implication, etc., etc. But I also know that when you are convinced that it's not only the P&B and the money who makes life acceptable and decent, we can negotiate much better. So I just wanted to wish you 2 days of good work, but on different issues that I think very interesting. But Guy, I don't think you are responsible, but if we don't insist in saying that the institutions in Europe need a reset after so many years from the Lisbon Treaty, we are just looking another way without addressing the real problem. If we don't arrive to have a common security policy, a common defense policy, we, frankly speaking, a friend of yours who was quite ironic said to me one day, Europe is an economic giant, a political wharf, nano, a defense shame. Was one of my colleagues from Belgium. Insomma, l'Europa rischia di essere un gigante economico, un nano politico e un verme militare. I think it's maybe too negative, but if we don't change route and we don't change, we risk to go exactly there. A big space of economic trade, etc., and nothing else. But our ambition, our dream, our hope is totally different. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Emma, for your powerful words. As always, grande Emma, when it comes to Europe and how we can build our European Union. Thank you for being with us and also sending this very positive pro-European message. Before we start, let me read you out some of the rules of this house. The event will take place fully in English, so no translation will be provided. We will start with some opening remarks from the speakers. After that, participants in the hall and joining via Zoom platform will be able to ask questions and share their comments and ideas. Next one, for those present in the venue, just raise your hand and make your question clear and louder. For those joining online, use the chat function on Zoom to write your question or to ask for the word and ask your question directly to the speakers. A colleague from The ALDE Party Secretariat will be monitoring the chat throughout the event. Please ensure that your microphone and video work correctly and that you have your name and country visible. A kind reminder for all of those joining online, please keep your microphones muted unless you are speaking. Now, allow me to welcome our distinguished speakers that you all know for today's panel. Olga Stefanishina, Deputy Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic Integration of Ukraine. Please, Olga. We mentioned the name of Guy Verhofstadt already several times, I hope for good reason. Of course for good reason. Guy, co-chair of Executive Board dedicated to Conference on the Future of Europe. Please, Guy, delighted to have you. Benedetto Della, Vedova, Under Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, Secretary of Più Europa. Please sit next to Guy. And last but not least, Antoneta Asenova, President of LYMEC. Please, Antoneta. Well, I want to have a dynamic discussion today with all of you. And let me start with Olga. What role do you foresee for countries outside the European Union? Because this is not only about European Union of 27, this conversation is for the future of European Union. How do we see European Union with Western Balkan countries, with Eastern partnerships, especially in your case with Ukraine?
Thank you so much, Ilhan. It's a great pleasure to be here in this very distinguished group of people by representing not only my government but also the Ukrainian party, servant of the people, who has a strong willingness to cooperate with the liberal and Democrats over the Europe, which is a part of the ideas we share. So the question you're putting is really interesting, because the conference is about the conference of the future of Europe, but not only European Union. So it's very important that all of the Europe could be engaged in this process, and we are happy that through these discussions we could be engaged. I would start with the very simple issues which should be clear before we start discussing the perspective of the future, is that where we were, where we are, and where do we see ourselves. So we see that basically the European Union has played a very strong role on the post-war period in terms of economic development, mobilizing and uniting everybody over the same values. But now we understand that the whole world is facing a very severe challenges, but also the very strong transformations related to post-industrial era, like digitalization, climate change, globalization. And this is something where European Union has been always playing a significant role, but the new leadership is expected also from our side. It is really important to understand that those countries from the region I represent, like Eastern Europe, but also Western Balkans, that we are not the ones we were 20 years ago. We have self-committed ourselves to European integration, and it brings its fruits. Ukraine has been undergoing through a very dynamic process of reforms, which brings us closer and closer to European values, to Copenhagen criteria, but also which makes us stronger, more resilient, and more capable and more contributive towards the developments within European Union. So for us, it's really important that when we are talking about the future, to take into account a number of points. When it comes to the reform, which will be presented in I think half a year, it's important to take into account that there should be, first of all, the policy of engagement. Because the future of Europe is no more lying only within European Union. And those policies and vision the European Union forms directly affects all of the countries outside of the European Union. So the all-European and engagement policies should be essential in the policies when we're talking about digitalization, when we're talking about the green transition and the economic and trade development. But also it is very important for us, those countries like Ukraine, who has been a country reforming itself, transforming itself, but also fighting the actual war on its territory launched by Russian Federation, it is really important for us to see the strong leadership and strong commitment to make sure that European Union is a global player. It is expected, and this competition between global powers directly affects those countries and those regions who are struggling for democratic transformations, who are successful in these democratic transformations, and this leadership is essential for countries like mine to make sure that we keep this dynamic, and no matter what are the political cycles or the political configuration in our country, because 7 years ago, people were standing on the European square in Ukraine, fighting for democracy, fighting for freedoms, dying basically for this freedom. And this is not the political slogans, this is part of our DNA. So whenever you see a Ukrainian saying that that we're fighting for democracy, it means that we're sometimes even more dedicated to these values than many of those who are living within European Union. And this leadership is something we can contribute to, and this is something that we are expecting from. So I would stop here saying this very initial remarks, and we'll be happy then to get closer to the discussion.
Thank you, Olga. Very, very good points made by you on European Union being global power, but also how to engage on different levels with Eastern Partnership countries, and in particular case with you, but also to show that you engage as a country, you engage as a political party with our MEPs in Brussels, also with our commissioners, liberal commissioners, and that you decided to come to Rome and to express your opinion about the conference. It's a big message to us that we are certainly going to work together. And as we spoke about the future plans, in March we will have a big conference in Kiev dedicated to future of Europe. There will be a big conference there. And Guy, the COVID is a striking point for Europe. And there is a direct question to you from Diana Lea from Latvia. And certainly she thinks that the conference is a good opportunity to reform European Union. But looks like the authoritarian states like China are better in managing crises like COVID. Better in managing because they have a different system. And will the concept of democracy be undermined if authoritarian countries such as China demonstrate that it can be better manage the crisis? And the question falls with the second one, and at the same time be economically more successful. What is the role of Europe in this crisis management?
Yeah, I don't know if that works. Yeah, now it works. So they have given me a good...
you want it good.
No, they think that they can cut it off, this one. So that's the reason that they have given it to me. So thank you very much for the opportunity, Jan, to be here. And I think that we can start the discussion on the Conference of the Future of Europe by talking about Ukraine. Because everything what is happening around Ukraine and what happened the last years around Ukraine is proof of the need for the Conference on the Future of Europe. Yeah. In the conflict that we have there, we have the will of a country and people to be independent, to be free, European values, to be not only independent and free, but even to see their future as a European future. We see in that conflict a big power, Russia, who doesn't allow that, and who thinks that this is their game, their part of their property, I should even say. We see in that conflict also how weak we are. I remember the day that together with Hans we went to Maidan to announce the sanctions that the European Union has taken at that time, 7 years ago. Well, we are still not capable to do that, to repeat that when it is necessary in a fast and effective way. because we are dependent in a certain way. Look to our energy policy, for example, from Russia. And it is then the Americans who have to come in and to push us, to take sanctions, and to say to Putin, if you go too far, there will be a cost, and sanctions will be prepared, what we are doing for the moment. So if you look to our tensions around Ukraine, it's exactly all the problems we face, all the weaknesses we have, you can find them in it. And so Ukraine is a very good example why we need a conference on the future of Europe. You talked about China, I talk about Russia, we can talk about India, we can talk about the US under Trump, but also under Biden. And the conclusion is every time the same. The world of tomorrow, dear friends, is not a world of nation states anymore, of 199 nation states. The world of tomorrow is a world of powers, coalitions, alliances, on a continental scale. China, that's not a nation. Forget it. It's not a nation. It's a civilization. It's Han. And there are many hundreds and ethnies and nations inside China, inside this civilization. And it is, a very cruel civilization in a certain way, as we've seen in Hong Kong, as we will see maybe also with the Uyghurs, as we see on a daily basis. That's a civilization. India is also not a nation. There are 2,000 nations in India. 2,000. So if they have to organize their country based on the principles of European nationalism, they would have 200 or 2,000 Indias somewhere on the Indian continent. They have 20 languages they use. They have 4 religions in India. But nevertheless, it's a big country, a democracy, it's the biggest democracy worldwide. The same is the case with the US, and the same is the case with many parts of the world. The world of tomorrow will be, if you want it or not, a competition. That sounds familiar for liberals, no? A competition between different standards and different models of the world. The way the Chinese and the Chinese Communist Party is looking to the world is a little bit different of our view to the world. And I don't want to live in a system dedicated and decided by the Chinese Communist Party, where in fact the whole technological revolution is used, is abused to control their society, to control their people. And I don't want to live neither under the umbrella of autocrats like Putin, like the Ukraine doesn't want, or Erdogan, and there are others that we can give as an example. So what is at stake, we have to be aware of that. That is that after 1989, we thought liberal democracy have won, and Fukuyama even wrote a big book about that. You remember that? The end of history. It was finished, the ideological competition and the ideological battle. Free market economy combined with liberal democracy, up, over. Even in Russia, they were applying it in a certain way. The reality is that the history has never ended. Certainly not with that book, and that in the meanwhile, we are in a new phase of the history of mankind, where it will be a competition, a fight of what will be the future of mankind. Will it be based on liberal democracy, yes or no? And that's not only a question outside the European Union, it's now also a question inside the European Union, as we see it in Hungary, as we see it in Poland, as we see it in I add also Slovenia to it, because that's the next example, bad example that we will face inside the Union. Therefore, the question is how we organize this European Union, this European continent, in a world where there is such a competition between different blocs and superpowers, you can name it, and at the same time defend our model, our values, our standards, our way of life. That is certainly not the standards of other parts of the world. That is at stake. And the answer that we have given with the 3 institutions is already in a certain way positive, and say, yeah, we cannot continue like that. We cannot always be too late, doing too little, too late, as we did after the financial crisis, as we did with the migration crisis, as we did with every crisis that we have faced. We can say that COVID, we did it a little bit better in any way than we did it with the financial crisis, because we did something, what was not the case after the financial crisis so many years ago. So that is at stake. Can we survive with this European Union, with this European continent, in this new world order, with what we have on the plate today, of how it is organized today? And the answer is no. There can be a moment that the European Union could disappear. There are people who are saying, yeah, Europe is eternal. Yeah, that's eternal. And the European Union is eternal. No, it's not eternal. There is no political organization, even not the Roman Empire. We are in the center here of the Roman Empire for the moment. Well, it was not eternal. And there were many, certainly, Roman politicians who thought that it was eternal. It was not. Well, will be the case also for Europe if we don't change it, if we don't reform it. It will go, yeah, it will face extinction towards the pressure, the enormous pressure created by other superpowers in the world. And we can feel that every day. So that's the purpose. What needs to be changed? How to change it? And I respond immediately to Emma Bonino in a positive way to say, yeah, also institutional questions will be on the table. Because you cannot make a distinction between, well, this is politics and this is institutions. That's stupid. Because bad institutions have as a consequence bad policies. And if you have not institutions, you cannot even develop policies. And at the same time, yeah, the policies are, yeah, the objective. The objective is not to have a fantastic institutions and to do nothing with it. No, both are going together. So we have to stop that stupid discussion in the union saying, yeah, what is now the most important? The policies of the institutions. The one is interlinked with the other. You cannot make a division between the one and the other. And that's at stake in there. And the second thing, what is at stake, is that we do it in a new way with the novelty, the involvement of the citizens, what we never did in the past. What I do tomorrow, I don't stay for the second day, Ilhan, because I go to Florence. In Florence, we have the third round, the last round of the citizens panels running. Tomorrow and after tomorrow in Italy. And it is based on their recommendations that we will formulate reforms. But this participation of the citizens is not a passive one, where they come and they say what they want and they go out. No, they stay in the room. They will be there when the MEPs, the MPs, the ministers, the commissioners will conclude on the reforms that we desperately need. And what I hope and what we hope is that the presence, the active participation of the citizens will be the turning point in this whole exercise. Because there they will create, in my opinion, the pressure where it will be based on what it will be possible to find agreements between the institutions and the political cycles in Brussels and in Strasbourg to change something. Thank you.
Yep. You're right, we had many failures on our attempts to change European Union for better, but for first time ever, three institutions are signing together, which gives a hope. And the second hope is that the citizens will put their ideas. The citizens will guide institutions and political leaders. And hopefully we'll make it successful, but we are already doing a great job in conference. Benedetto, I have a suggested question for you from Gabriele Bentani. Gabriele Bentani from Italy is asking you, what will be the future of trade? I don't know, it's a broad question, but he comes with a second question, and it's more related to strategic autonomy. We had a great discussion in Paris last week, organized by European Liberal Forum, Guy, Hilde, Sandro Gozzi, Valérie. We had a good talk about what we can do in the future with the strategic autonomy. And it's also a big question. How do you see the strategic autonomy with your Italian eyes?
So thank you very much. First of all, let me thank the ALDE for remembering here in Rome Hans van Balen, that was president at the time when Più Europa joined the ALDE as a full member. Well, the question is straight to the point. Of course, I think that free trade is essential for not only for us liberals, but is essential inside the EU. I think that free trade inside the single market is really best practice that we can show to the world. And I think that trade policy is a good example on how EU can function in the interest of the citizens and in the interest of freedom at a global scale. I think that we have to maintain our commitment to have globalization driven by rules. That means WTO, that means the trade agreements that only EU can sign in the interest of each and single member state, as it was with Canada or with Korea or with Japan. The bloc can have can negotiate in the best interest of our companies, not each single member states, not even Germany nowadays can negotiate it. Of course, when it comes to the strategic autonomy, well, first of all, the idea, I subscribe what Guy said about the necessity to act as a bloc in the global competition. Today is the World Day for Human Rights, for instance, and we have to say that probably if we look to an EU perspective, things are on the average at the EU level going better, not everywhere, but on the average it's going better. We recognize more rights about LGBT community, elder people, disabled people, and so on. But on a global scale, the situation on human rights is getting worse and worse. If we consider China, for instance, and what is happening in China with artificial intelligence. And we have to act as EU as soon as possible to have a sound regulation and to try to set the standard, at least for the democratic world, about the use of artificial intelligence in the interest of the people and serving the freedom of the people, and not the opposite, as it is happening in China, with the great power of collecting data by the Chinese state. But, of course, strategic autonomy is first of all about diplomatic and military common policy, defense common policy, that it's urgent. We are close to Libya now. When 10 years ago was the crisis in Libya after Gaddafi, France has its own agenda, Italy has its own agenda, and the result, EU has no agenda, EU as the European Union. The result is that now in Libya we have Russia, we have Turkey, and Europe can touch the ball. Strategic autonomy is also about the raw materials and energy. We are experimenting during the pandemic and after the pandemic shortage of, not shortage, but high cost of energy. That is due to the fact that we have no real common policy on energy, no common storage of gas neither. We are discussing if it's correct or not to open the new pipeline, Nord Stream. But we need gas from Russia, we need gas from the southern Mediterranean coast, and we are not be able to have our own strategy on energy, as the US did in the last decades. 20 years ago, US were depending on oil in the Middle East. Now they do not depend on oil in the Middle East anymore, because they are a superpower also when it comes to energy and oil. And a result is that they are not so interested in the security of the Middle East as they was in the previous decades. We have the shortage of microchips and semiconductors. Well, so far, the main provider of semiconductors for Europe is Taiwan. That is a free place, good place where to conduct business and probably so far to live. But of course, we have to develop an autonomous strategy in terms of energy, in terms of semiconductors, in terms of vaccine, in terms of research and development. And just to conclude with the answer, I think that we have to find the balance, but it's possible to find the balance among free trade, not only inside the European Union, but also among European unions and the rest of the world, and at the same time to have some good policy in order to develop as strategic autonomy in terms of energy, semiconductors, raw materials, and so on. But to develop this policy, we need, and I agree with Guy, we need sound institutions and good institutions prepared with powers, rules to do all these things. So far, we have power about trade policy, and trade policy, I think, is functioning. It's functioning very well. Of course, we have to reform everything. We have to reform also trade policy. But trade policy, being one of the few really EU policies, function very well. Italy is one of the second power in terms of exports in Europe, and now is the first one in the last semesters. I always say to the Italian companies, this is thanks to the EU. Being part of EU is the reason of your success in exports. So we can balance free trade and strategic autonomy.
Thank you, Benedetto. You described rightfully on foreign affairs what we call exactly in Brussels Europa la carte. Europa la carte can do only too little, too late. But moving to the younger generation, because this conference is unique with a lot of things, but certainly is unique because it includes younger generation. And Antonetta, knowing you and knowing LYMEC, you guys were always saying, well, we want to discuss Europe. You want to discuss Europe. When we are going to discuss Europe? You discussed many times Europe in your conferences, events, and what are the findings? And the more important question comes from Waya Comerna from Spain, and is how you guarantee that the voice of young people are heard? It is a very legitimate question.
At this stage, I have the feeling should go back boomeranging to the two of you sitting in the panel, because what we did, it's natural that the young people want to discuss Europe, because Europe is our future. We very well understand, we study how Europe came about from the ashes of war, and we cherish this, but this is history. Now it's time to make Europe of our generation, to make a braver Europe, to make a Europe that is fit to our expectations, to our living standards. And this is why, guided by this understanding, already when we first heard that the discussion on the Conference for the Future of Europe is going to be coming up, we at the European Liberal Youth Organization organized this platform where we got together all our youth organizations and asked them these questions. What do you think is not working? How do you think we can change them? And the results are two documents that we have filed on the digital platform. We've used every possible tool that this conference is offering to young people, be it from submitting the proposals on the digital conference, be it in participating in different, as you said, discussions, conferences, you name it, sending those proposals to the three institutions single-handedly as letters, addressing the members of the Renew Europe group, and discussing at this stage, what needs to change of the conference itself between our leaders of our youth organizations. And the thing about young people and what they want from this conference, not from the general discussion of the future of Europe, but what we want from this conference is to see concrete outcomes and concrete ambition. Why? It's because we're not interested at who the culprit is. Is it the council? Is it the whole institutional setting? Is it the treaties? We're not interested who is at fault. We're interested, how do we make our future better? How do we live a better life than our parents? How do we step up one step further and, cross to that future? How do we change what is not working? And we very, very clearly see what's not working. I'm not going to go to it because Mr. Verhofstadt painted that picture very, very well. And we have answers to those questions. And we've tabled those answers. We've submitted them to you. They're in your hands. Now, what we expect from you is concretics, something to come out of it, something to move forward Europe, to take a leap forward with European integration, to give us a better future, and yeah, to just be brave, because that's what young people are expecting from the current decision makers.
Well, the future of liberalism looks like it's in a good hands. They have a plan, they have a strategy, they submitted their proposals, we take it from them and implement it. Put it in policies like Mr. Asmani does for the group. Now it's time to your questions. I turn to the audience here. I see Rudy is willing to go first. Please, yeah, microphone will come for sure. Introduce yourself and the organization you're representing here. So Rudy, first question, and then I saw a gentleman behind Rudy. Yeah, and Nino Jakovčić, former colleague Nino Jakovčić, is with us.
I introduce myself for people not knowing me. I'm Rudolf Rentschler from FDP, Freie Demokratische Partei in Germany. For short, for a lot of people, I'm Rudi. I have a question, especially to Guy Verhofstadt, also for the other ones. Guy Verhofstadt told Europe should act as a bloc, and that's also a question of institutions, same as told us Emma Bonino. Now, how can we advance with the institution? What's the idea? We have had two visions. Some years ago it was Macron-Sorbonne talk, and now we have a vision in the German coalition. The coalition treaties are the hands of the German liberals going quite far for closer European Union. Even in the final stage, we imagine a decentralized federal European state. Okay. It's the final, but there are steps between, and how can we go on, for instance, with a conference on future of Europe, the citizens, but there also should be qualified politicians also to be implied, since a lot of citizens do not know very much about European institutions. Then here a little remark to Più Europa, always speaking from free trade. The Liberal International is speaking of free and fair trade. I'm very scandalized if you forget the name fair. Free and fair trade, for instance, we have also objections to CETA and other, which says free trade alone is not so good. Okay, thanks a lot for the question.
Thank you so much. Europe is your passion, which is good, always good to have you here. Nino Jakovčić, former colleague from Croatia, good to be with us. Croatia.
Thank you very much. My name is Nino Jakovčić. I'm coming from Croatia, a region on the northern Adriatic Sea, region of Istria, a very liberal region the last 30 years. And I started my career 30 years ago during the war in Yugoslavia. That's the reason why I want to say very, very clear. We need a European army. We need not an alternative to NATO, but we need our security, our forces, and please do something on this issue, because without a strong Europe and army also means be strong, we will not be so important in the world. And the last thing, please don't forget the countries of Western Balkan. Today, Europe has a whole, but Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, North Macedonia, Montenegro, and Albania and Kosovo are not a whole. There are countries, nice countries, and we have to help them. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We started our town hall meeting exactly from Sarajevo to send this positive signal to the region that they all belong to the European Union. There is a process, and ALDE party will assist as much as possible with our member organizations in helping them to gradually connect to the European Union. Third question, please. Okay, take two more. David from UK, and before that, the gentleman.
Hi, my name is Yuri, and I'm from Più Europa, Italy. So my question is about human rights and rule of law. And I would like to ask what us liberals can do to make sure that human rights and rule of law are respected within the European Union. We see that clearly Article 7 isn't working very well. There have been some steps that have been taken. The European Parliament and the European Commission have started infringement procedures against Hungary and Poland, for instance, but that's clearly not enough. So my question is, what can we do in the short run? And then I have an opinion. I think in the long run, doing away with the unanimity vote at the Council, which is kind of the problem at the moment, can do something. So would you agree? I guess I know the answer of some of you already. Would you agree with that? And how can we make sure that that happens?
Thank you, Yuri. Good to see you after so many years. Good liberal, good individual liberal. David from UK, Lib Dems. And thank you for organizing all these events in UK. I gladly participated to many of them.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, David Chalmers from the Liberal Democrats in the UK. And as you mentioned, Ilhan and Timmy, both of you, and I'd like to thank ALDE for the engagement that you gave to us in the conferences that we held throughout October in the UK. They're all held online. We had about 14 different conferences, hundreds of our members engaged, looking at the future vision for the European Union and for Europe as a whole, but also for our own sort of relationship with the EU and how we as a party can sort of get closer and develop policies towards the European Union. It has been a really, really fantastic sort of project for ourselves. It's really energized our party. As I said, hundreds of members from across the country engaged in those discussions. And you touched on the sort of question earlier on. For those of us that are outside the European Union, and you know, Olga replied on many of those countries that are looking towards immediate entry. Those countries like the UK, Switzerland, Norway, that are outside, and it's probably going to be, we have set ourselves as a goal, the Liberal Democrats, to take us back in to the European Union on a long-term basis, but we have to actually work towards developing a closer relationship with the EU. And so how do you see the EU developing to be able to engage better with those countries that are outside the European Union? Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you for your question, but also say thank you for your dedication to work in a close manner with ALDE party and to keep fighting for European aspirations of UK people. Guy, most of the questions were related to you. I propose you start, and then others will put their inputs.
Well, in fact, I'd like to answer to all the questions. I think that they were all very interesting. So the last one on the UK. I was 2 days ago on the television. I was looking to a fantastic film, The Darkest Hour, on Winston Churchill. You have seen it, maybe, that film? A crazy good film. And you say, why are these people who fought with us outside our common European project? That is the most crazy thing that you can imagine. And so if you see this film, you see the dedication of Winston Churchill in a certain way, in his war cabinet, totally alone, against all the naives around him, fighting for democracy, for liberty, for freedom, even not receiving from Roosevelt the necessary airplanes and so on, but with an enormous conviction. Yeah, Europe exists today because of that conviction of this man and of that people, of the British people. So there is only one place of Britain for Britain, that's inside the European family. That's the only place they play. And I'm pretty sure that if you continue your work, what you are doing for the moment, there will be that majority will be there again. Not tomorrow, maybe not in a few months' time, or maybe a few years, but certainly there will be a next generation who are saying, look, in this world order, we have to be there. And we need also the UK to do that for a number of reasons. For reasons of values, defending values, for reasons of the internal market, don't forget it, for reasons also to defend our European civilization and values in this new world order. Who can do that better than the UK with the European Union, and the best is inside the European Union. So I'm very supportive for everything what we can do to create that link with, and to continue to have that relationship with Britain. One of the ideas I got, it never materialized, was to give the possibility for a European citizenship for those British citizens who are saying, yeah, but I am European. I want to continue to have a European citizenship. And I think it will re-emerge now in the conference, that idea. There are citizens who are proposing that, saying, wherever I live, I want to keep my link, my relationship with Europe. What is a fantastic idea, and what we have to cherish. I wanted to come back also to the Balkan history. Nino, that's his real name, so Jakic, that's another name. Nino is his name. Nino, I see that your capelli are very long, eh? That's since you are outside the parliament, so, okay. But yeah, the Western Balkan, let's be honest, it's completely stupid what we do. It would be better that the Western Balkans inside the European family, then we don't need to continue to have soldiers on the ground in the Western Balkans. Because that is what we have for the moment. In Bosnia, in Kosovo, still European soldiers there. Because it seems to me that the future of all these countries is inside the European Union, and we have to continue to work for that. And on the defense, then I stop, because otherwise I will monopolize this whole the debate now. On defense, I'm completely on line that defense needs to be, we need to create a European defense community. That's for sure. By the way, that was the first project. If these French were not so stupid in 1955 to vote against it in the French National Assembly, we would have today a completely different world and a completely different Europe. Completely different. Can you imagine that we had approved the European defense community in 1955? With everything what it implies, because it was a whole army, yeah? So everything, and then at a certain moment also a constitution to organize all this, and then it was voted down in the French National Assembly for stupid reasons, where we will not go into detail, but we need that defense commitment, because it's the biggest waste of money in the European Union for the moment. Europe spends 4 times more than Russia on military. 4 times, eh? So that is then 40 times more than Ukraine, eh? on defense. That is what we spent. And together with the UK, we spent more than the Chinese on defense. And it's true, we spent only 40% of the Americans. But we can only do 10% of the operations of the American army. So I'm a lawyer. I'm not a mathematician. Nevertheless, I was Minister of Budget at a certain moment in my life. But I'm always saying, if you are Minister of Budget, you don't need to know anything about mathematics. You need to the word no. That's all thing that you need to know. So, and that's. But I know, even I know as a lawyer, that if you spend 40% of the Americans, you can only do 10% of the American operations of the American army, that you are 4 times less effective, no? And that's because the duplication in Europe. We duplicate everything. We have the most, the highest number of soldiers of the world that we have. But we are not capable to stop the Russians when they come this side without American help. We have more than 103, 105 equipment, military equipments, different military equipments in Europe. It's less than 20 in the US, to give an example. So it's the biggest waste of money that exists. And now, inside the Democratic Party, the Democratic think tanks, inside the administration of Mr. Biden, they understand it. For the first time, the Americans are saying themselves, it's time that you organize your defense on the European level the fastest as possible, because we cannot continue like that. And when Biden comes to Europe, to the NATO summit, a few weeks ago, it was, what he said, he talked about what? He talked about China. In my opinion, China is the South Pacific, eh? That's not the North Atlantic. But in any way, what this means is that he and we have to see the future of NATO in a different way. It will be a world treaty organization to defend democracy worldwide. That will be the future. And inside that, there will be the need for a strong European pillar. And this strong European pillar, that is what we have to create the fastest as possible. That's not against NATO, that's strengthening NATO. That's strengthening the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And the Americans will be now the first to ask for it, to say, do your job, do it. And don't continue to have an inflation of bilateral agreements between that country and that country, but it doesn't change nothing on the ground. Nothing on the ground. When we start in Libya, after 2 days, we have to phone to the Americans, we have not precision ammunition anymore. If we had the problems in the Western Balkans, Nino, it were the Americans, Clinton, who did the job. Not we. And Clinton was explaining there in America where he did that operation, because there was no American who knew where it was. In Kosovo, and the bombardments on Belgrade and so on, he did the job. And so we cannot continue like that. We cannot continue. We are not respected in the world, you know, because we are not capable to do that. And there, it brings me to my last point on the German.
Time flies fast with you.
Why I'm saying that? Because for the first time, these things are possible again in Europe. Because, let's be honest, for the first time we will see a French government, hopefully with a re-elected Emmanuel Macron, who is a very dedicated pro-European, and the German government again speaking the same language. Because let's be honest, the Merkel, I like Mrs. Merkel, I find that she's a fantastic politician, but for Europe, she did nothing at all. Nothing. When there was the migration crisis, he said, wir schaffen das. We're going to do it ourselves. It was not a European solution. Fortunately, with the COVID, there was this, COVID was, didn't know any borders, so that was the only advantage of COVID is that it is not, it has no national identity with COVID. So what happened was that she was obliged to do something. So we, for the first time, we have now a German government with the same ideas, more or less the same ideas as the French. So for the first time, they will, again, using the same language. That doesn't mean that the French will speak German, or the German French is impossible, but at least that will happen. And that is a huge, the conference for that has a chance because of this engine that again for the first time speaks and goes in the same direction.
Yeah, good. Benedetto, I give you a word and then I turn to our online audience for 2 questions.
I want to add a few things to what Guy said perfectly. This is when we will elect directly the president of EU, he is my candidate, of course. But you forget Italy, because this is the windows of opportunity, because you have Macron, you have the new coalition with liberals in Germany, and you have the Draghi's cabinet in Italy. And when Draghi went to the parliament, he said, my government is a pro-EU government. Il mio governo è un governo europeista e atlantista, pro-EU and pro-good relations among EU and the US. And I think that what you said about the necessity of a common defense policy is one of the things that I was in the panel of citizens about the role of EU in the world, in the future, and the idea to have our own defense, common defense system is largely shared by citizens, first of all by younger citizens. I want to say a word on the answer that Yuri. Of course, we are back to the speech of Emma. We need to finish with the unanimity. If we want to tackle the rule of law and human rights inside the EU, we need to finish with unanimity rules. What is going on with Poland and Hungary show that we need to end the unanimity. Even for one more thing, it's not only a domestic issue, but being, just not to mention a global power, being China, now you need just one government on your side when it comes to foreign policy of the European Union. Okay, you can, they are ready to pay a lot of money, to invest a lot of money, as they did in Montenegro, but this is another story. So they need just one ally inside the EU, they can block everything. Why, and I'm finishing, why the free trade policy, free and fair policy, but we are the champion of globalization rules driven, so that it means more or less fair trade. Why the trade policy is functioning in EU? Because you do not need unanimity. You can decide with a qualified majority. So, Yuri, you are perfectly right, because the situation of human rights is not going better worldwide, but we have some risks inside the EU, and we have not the instruments to block. I'm sure that the majority of members of the European Parliament, of member states, the Commission, the majority of EU citizens doesn't like what is going on against LGBT community in Hungary or in Poland. But we have no instruments, real instruments to block. And at the end of the day, I hope that the Commission will keep the point to say to our friends in Hungary and Poland, you are benefiting from the single market as nobody else. We have Italian companies that withdraw their investment from Italy and they go to Hungary and Poland. Okay, it's the rules of the game. We accept it. You are receiving funds from taxpayers in Italy, in France, in Germany. Okay, it's the rules. But you have to be compliant with the rules of the club. Otherwise, things are getting worse and worse.
Thank you, Benedetto. And now we go from Rome to Cyprus, to Praxua Antoniado, good liberal friend. I will ask Praxua, and the next will be Clara Puig from Spain.
Thank you, Ilhan. Good evening, dear friends from the United Democrats in Cyprus. I have a question, a comment for Guy and partially for Antoinetta. Our concern is that in order to achieve the reform necessary to make Europe stronger, we need to gain the support of the people, of the EU citizens, and to have this support with us, which is, of course, the target of the process taking place now. But also, in order to have the support of the people, we need to have truly free media. As also Timmy mentioned, in his introduction, bringing also the example of Brexit. And we see this issue of not essentially free media on the surface, but not in essence, and partially this may also be taking place in Cyprus. So I suggest that as part of the reform which is targeted, that we find a way to introduce stronger safeguards for free media, to make this institutional, that there are institutional safeguards to ensure that media is truly free. And this also relates, I suppose, to what Antoinetta said, that yes, we know the history, Europe arose out of the ashes of 2 world wars, but this is part of history and we need to move on. Yes, but we risk if we do not really have the people with us through proper information, we risk what Guy said, that the European project may not be eternal, and that in the end, this European project of peace and prosperity will remain indeed in history and will not have a future.
Praxula,
yes.
Evcharisto, we are under enormous pressure. Very, very good and clear points made by you. Thank you so much. Good to see you again. Antoinette and Guy will answer your questions. We are going to Spain. Clara, please.
Hello. First of all, I wanted to thank all participants for being here today and sharing their views. I have 2 questions. One is for Ms. Stefanishina, because I found it very interesting what you were saying about the future of Europe, that is not playing anymore only within the European Union. And I wanted to ask, where does she see the relationship between the EU and Ukraine going, especially within the context of the present conflict with Russia? My second question would be for the LYMEC president, for Antoinetta. You know, I have been very involved in the development of LYMEC policies and proposals for the conference. But one thing that worries me a lot is that the people that are interested in the conference are normally people, or at least what I have seen, very involved in EU politics already, that are close to the EU bubble, but whenever I talk with my family or with other people that are outside, they don't seem to either have the information. I think I have explained to my parents what the conference was 6 times already, because it's not covered that much in the national media, and the role precisely of not only having the citizens that go to Strasbourg or the people that are really involved already in the conference being involved, but also the general public opinion. How can we ensure that we are getting this public support, or at least that this information is reaching the public? We want to see outcomes, yes, but if everybody thinks that just a few people took those decisions, would it be really something good?
Thank you, Clara. Muchas gracias. Thank you so much. My proposal is this time we start with Antoinetta, and she will deliver her concluding remarks. I remember the famous conversation between Margaret Thatcher and Mikhail Gorbachev, when Margaret asked Mikhail Gorbachev, "How are you, Mikhail, today?" And he answered, "I feel good, but if you continue talking to me, I'm not that good." So the status quo in European Union today is good, but if you continue talking, looks like it's not that good. But there is a hope that with this conference, we can reshape European Union, we make it more efficient. And I would like to ask Antoinetta to start concluding her answers, but also, if you can, to finish the questions. One of my famous question to you: conference will be a success if. Can you finish this sentence?
To me, conference will be a success if we have concrete results and at least unanimity is abolished. This is about it. It doesn't matter how we're going to achieve it. The conference will be a success if something concrete comes out of it. And that brings me to the 2 questions. Look, The platform gathered ideas, the panels encompassed the discussions between the selected citizens, but if in the end of the day this is boiled down into proposals that are already on the table, proposals that the Commission is fitting within its current priorities, then indeed the whole exercise will be downplayed as an exercise of Brussels geeks. That's going to be it. And that is why it's very important that, as the two speakers said, that citizens are included in this process. And this is why, as I mentioned, in September, we gathered the presidents of the youth organization and we came up with this call of action, seeing it as a kind of like the pause between the two parts of the game, to give our conclusions of what we think needs to change. For example, to have more influencers included in the whole process, to have more national leaders speak about the conference, and of course to engage more national media. And for that, if we, the young liberals, want this process to not just stop with this conference, but to continue being a platform for the citizens to have a direct conversation with decision makers, then there are a few things that we need to change about the conference itself as well. For example, these panels could happen in one different capital every time so that you capture the media. Because the reality is, when US elections are happening, in the US capital, there's 10 times more European media than there is when the Conference for the Future of Europe is gathering in Strasbourg. This is ridiculous, and this is something that we need to tackle. We as society, media, and generally all of us, we need to constantly change this process. And to finish everything that we've been discussing today, the Conference for the Future of Europe is about evolution. It was said during the discussion that there will be no end of history, and that is very much true. History is moving, and we have no other chance but to move with its pace. For this, we need ambition, we need changes, we need to look forward to the future. We cannot risk to sleepwalk through this chance.
Benedetto, for your conference will be a success if?
If it will not be a failure. Well, I think that we have, I hope that it will be possible that the outcome of the conference will be some, maybe few priorities decided with a huge majority, but unfortunately the success of the conference at the end of the day will be in the hands of the institutions that will decide, European Parliament, Commission, and unfortunately Council. But I hope, and the national parliaments. But I hope that it will be possible to have some few clear points of improvement that are needed in the interest of our values and our interests as companies and as EU citizens. If we are not able to change the rule of the game will be the same, but it will be the game of the past and not of the future.
Thank you. Guy, back to you.
Yeah.
What is a success?
Well, first of all, that there is no misunderstanding. The conference is not there as a sort of PR operation towards the public opinion. That is not that's not the conference. It's not a pure saying, look, we listen to the citizens. Look how good we are, fantastic. Hop, and it's over. That's not the conference. So I'm less busy with the question, are there now 40,000 accounts opened by citizens or 35,000 accounts opened by citizens? I like that there were millions of accounts opened. There are in total 4 million unique visitors have been on the digital platform. So that's not bad, but that's not 4 of 1. That's 1% of the population in Europe. But that's not the main point. The main point of the conference are, in fact, the citizens' panels, where we have randomly selected 800 people in 4 panels of 200. Every of these 200 people are real people that for the first time are participating in that. So we know that from day one that on these 200, 193, 94 of them have never been in contact with politics, have never been involved in Europe, have never been involved in such an exercise. So the legitimacy of the whole exercise lies there. Not in the fact that there are 3 million visitors or 4 million visitors or 5 million visitors, but in the fact that in the citizens panels, we receive from the citizens panels a number of recommendations and proposals that are really backed by the entire population of Europe. We cannot put all the entire population of Europe in the meeting room, but by doing that, we want to create proposals and pressure for proposals that will be very difficult to deny by even member states. What do kind of member states say? Oh yeah, it's my citizens who ask for that. I don't want it. So, you know, when Parliament is asking something, I can understand that member states say, yeah, but when Parliament, together with the national parliaments, with the Commission, supported by the citizens panel, saying, look, it's time now to start with the European intervention force. It's time to end unanimity in a number of items. It's time to end Sofagate, so that there is at least one phone number, and that Kissinger can finally find it, that one phone number. So things like that, it will be very difficult. Or for example, on a totally other field, like in digital, it's time to create our own standards, digital standards in Europe, instead of copying the American or maybe tomorrow applying the Chinese standards. It's time maybe to use our capacity in 5 and 6G of European companies to use it. We are talking about Huawei, and we have Nokia and Ericsson, who are the only in the world who can compete with them. It's time, for example, to have our capacity in semiconductors. If you need a semiconductor in the world, how you do it? First of all, you go to LYMEC in Louvain in Belgium, where there are thousands and thousands of people working on the next generation of nanochips. Then you go to ASML in Eindhoven to ask for the production lines, because they have nearly a monopoly on these production lines of these nanochips, and then you put it in Taiwan. And that's the way it works. Instead of creating our own capacity, we have everything to create our own capacity, but we don't do it. So the conference is about that. The conference is about how to overcome the classical, traditional obstacle in the decision reform-making process of the Union. Because it's not the first time that we see that. It started in '55, but then we got the French to blame for that. But now we cannot blame the French anymore, because they are in favor of, Macron is in favor of a huge reform of the Union. So and he's in the chairmanship for 6 months, from the 1st of January on. So we hope, and there is a new German government, by the way, with some federal views in it. And there is Draghi in Italy. And there is a new government in the Netherlands, with maybe also more pro-European views, and so on and so on. So, and at the same time, we are attacked on the outside of the Union. In Ukraine, we are attacked in a number of places in our neighborhood and outside our neighborhood. So I think it could create an environment that something can come out. I'm very prudent now. I say something can come out. And because of the pressure that will exist. And that could be, at a certain moment, a crucial choice to make. Because let me remember the way the American Federation has been founded. That was not with unanimity. That were 9 states who were, and 4 were against it, and the 9 said to the other 4, look, we are losing the war against the Brits here. Sorry, but that's history. Or we make a federation, or we don't. We are against. Well, we are in favor. It's 9 against 4. What do you want? You You join or you go out. And all 4 joined. Even Rhode Island. Even Rhode Island, the rough state of Rhode Island. So to tell you that in a certain moment we are at a point where, we need to, put the nail and met de namer op de nagel. How you say that in good English? But we need to do it. We need to do it now. And if we don't do it now, then we are in troubled waters.
Okay. Thank you, Guy. Olga?
Thank you, Ilhan. Colleagues, of course, there are so many reflections, but I would start by saying that I will answer your question by the end of my remarks. And I think it's very important to hear the feedback from the perspective of my part of Europe, of my region, of a country. And I will start my remarks by saying, which country do I represent? I represent a 40 million country with the most educated people of Europe, which has been recognized by all the ratings. A country producing and exporting and importing everything from the organic food to the most sophisticated defense techniques. A country dedicating 5% of its GDP annually for the security and defense budget. A country who has raised the IT market 15 times for the 2 years. A country who votes and lives in the smartphone. And we definitely have something to suggest to Europe. And what do we expect? We expect really a continental power, the European Union and Europe to become a continental power. Because I fully agree with the remarks that this is really essential for us, because there is no challenges that could be faced by the, as President Duda was referring, which is not maybe very in fashion, I mean, to quote him right now in these circumstances. But it's really important now to recognize that EU is not a closed, sophisticated club of players. And the decisions which are now taken, they're so impactful and they're so unbordered that they could not be faced by limiting with specific borders, especially when we're talking about the energy crisis. This is something which could not be put in a specific border because we should face these challenges together, because Russia is really outside of EU borders, but it plays the energy market, and it plays the rules by skyrocketing the prices. And these prices, they have no borders, they have no limits, and they are not subordinated to any regulations, you know. The same comes to the green transition and the climate change. This is something which is, again, is not limited by any borders. And if we want to reach climate neutrality and to reach the ambitions of the Paris Agreement, we should act together, and there should no be borders in that regard. And this is very important that if we face this reality, we should understand that following this reality, there should be a reform of the institutions. And it is absolutely essential when I talk about the engagement and all-European approach. It would definitely bring us not only to the enlargement discussions or the aspirations discussions. It's vital to reconsider the unanimity itself, because there is a number of areas where decisions can no longer be taken only by European Union, because they impact Ukraine. For example, if European Union imposes new CO2 rules emissions, all the dirty cars go into our market. And this is the reality. And if Poland has a migration crisis on its borders, it immediately affects Ukraine. And in fact, while we're sitting and having discussions here, 500,000 of Ukrainian people are working in Italy in different services, and 2 million of people are living and working in Poland, and millions of EU citizens are staying in Ukraine. We have a free trade area, we have a single aviation area agreement, so we're so interconnected that there's no other way but to limit ourselves with the decisions which could be limited by a border. So reconsidering the unanimity in that regard is absolutely essential, because reconsidering unanimity is the new enlargement to our regard. And finally, I want to answer the question, the successful outcome of the conference would be then defined by our servant of the people team with the two dimensions. If the issue of been reaching you all with on the all-European and engagement approach will be addressed and presented in a very clear institutional dimensions, and the proposal to reform the European Union and adjust it to the challenges. But also, if I will see that this reform will open the way to the new flow of the reformers, of the liberals, because this is exactly where the emotion we have here in Ukraine. I'm here represented with the 4 members of the Ukrainian administration, and we're all under 40 years, and this is the average age of all of our reformers. And we are the fresh blood of reformers struggling and having the freshness of each and every value filled at our borders, at our territory, and every word which is now fixed in the Constitution of European Union is really in our hearts. So we have this energy, and we want to see this energy and this way to new reformers, and that's why I guess I am here to say that we stand with you. We're ready to contribute. We're ready to bring this energy, fresh ideas and fresh reforms from our territory, and to bring it to European Union, and to make sure that there is really a strong ambition to have the continental power reborn in our part of the world.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. After a very powerful message from Olga, I don't want to prolong this discussion. Thank you so much, Olga, Guy, Benedetto, Antonetta. For me, it was a privilege to moderate this panel. Can I ask for a big applause to our speakers? Big applause to you and to all those following this conference behind the screens. Thank you so much.
us today. Last Friday, we all woke up to the tragic news that our ALDE party president, Hans van Baalen, had passed away. Hans was a true liberal who fought for democracy in Europe and across the world his entire political career and his entire life. That's also one of the reasons why Hans felt so very strongly and passionate about the Conference on the Future of Europe, and for making sure that we as liberals and as the ALDE party would do our utmost to make sure that this doesn't just become a PR exercise, but a genuine listening exercise, a genuine deliberative democracy process. And that's also why today we wanted to maintain this event to launch the ALDE Party Action Plan on the Conference on the Future of Europe. And we want to really do it in Hans's honor. And that's why in just half a minute, I'll hand over the floor to Mr. Lambsdorff, one of our ALDE Party vice presidents and long-term colleague and friend to Hans, to say a few words in his memory. And I believe Ms. Woutmans and Ms. Asenova would also like to say a few words. We'll then do a 1 minute of silence in Hans's memory, after which we will proceed with the subject matter at hand, which is indeed to discuss the future of Europe, where our esteemed speakers will very shortly give their opening remarks as to their thoughts on the future of Europe. And then really we will open it up to your questions, to have this kind of very open dialogue, to hear what is your passions, what are your priorities. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Mr. Lambsdorff, and I look forward to this event.
Thank you so much. Yes, indeed. It's a very sad opportunity, and I'm a most imperfect replacement for Hans. But we here at the ALDE Party have to really realize the shock of his loss. It was a very intense shock. Just last week, a week ago, essentially, more or less, we had our final bureau meeting, and Hans was there throughout, totally present, leading the party as was his usual style, giving ideas, insights, and inspiration. And so for someone like me who has known Hans from a time when the ALDE wasn't even called the ALDE, but the European Liberals, Democrats and Reformers, the ELDR, it's also a personal loss, very much so. Hans was a faithful friend. Behind me you see the River Rhine in West Germany. I'm from the German Liberals, and our political fortunes go up and down in this country. And throughout, even when we were down and out, he would, come to our events, represent ELDR or ALDE or the VVD, his mother party in the Netherlands. So he was always there to help, to assist. We worked together many years, for many, many years in the European Parliament. We shared a passion for diplomacy. We shared a passion for developing a global role for the European Union, something that I think the past few months have revealed to be even more urgent than it has been over the last few years, with some of the more unfortunate events that we had to witness. He was also, and those who know Hans and have worked with him for a long time, he was an extremely hardworking man. We stayed at the same hotel in Strasbourg in our plenary weeks, and it didn't really matter when I came down from my room, he was already sitting there working. He was somebody who really believed in the mission of liberalism, the mission of liberty, of freedom, of democracy. And he felt that passion, that he wanted to bring it to other people. It was something that really characterized him as a person, as a human being, but what also characterized him as a human being. And that's something that many people oversee when they only see him saw him in a formal role. He was a very warm-hearted person, very popular, because he was, I'd say as a man myself, he was a nice guy. I mean, he was simply a nice guy, and he would never, ever let political differences get, in the way of a harmonious personal relationship. So he had the respect of political opponents as well, from the conservatives, the socialists, the Greens. Everybody knew what he stood for. He was very straightforward. He was very diplomatic. He was, as Guy Verhofstadt wrote, a very crafty compromise maker. He could negotiate very well, but he would also always see to it that whatever your political differences, personal matters were important to him, and that there was always personal respect. Now, Hans, today we all speak English. English is the Latin of our days, as I say, but Hans was a very good German speaker. He spoke German fluently, and so he came to Germany not only to our party congresses, either when we were up or down. He was also a member of the supervisory board of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation. And to those of you who don't know what the Naumann Foundation for Freedom is, it is the, I would say, academic, intellectual think tank, a branch of organized liberalism, A, in Germany, but B, really around the world, because it's a foundation that has a global presence, is to be found everywhere, and is also, I would say, a great organizational help for another passion of Hans's, and that's Liberal International. The Naumann Foundation has offices in, South Africa, West Africa, North America, in many European countries. And Liberal International brings together liberals really from around the world. And what made the foundation so important to Hans was that, as somebody who believed so deeply in liberal values, the foundation for him was like a muscle he could use to carry the message around the world. And it was truly and really important to him to be part of the supervisory board. I still remember how happy he was when he was invited. Because it really meant something to him. And Liberal International, of course, did as well. And that is my final thought, perhaps, because it's something that also links the two of us on a personal level. Hans was a fighter for liberals and Democrats in particularly difficult countries, in authoritarian systems, under very dire circumstances. Our Russian friends, for example, could always turn to him, friends in North Africa and other African countries, or in the Arab world, people who fought for freedom of conscience, freedom of action, freedom of the press, independence of the judiciary. All of these things, they were so dear to Hans. And with the Naumann Foundation and Liberal International, he could turn this passion into a global endeavor. And so we miss him already, but I know Hans is missed around the world. And having said all that, my thoughts, of course, are with his wife and his young son, who lost their husband and father far too early. Hans was merely 6 years older than I am. I'm 54, he was 60. And it's such a terrible loss at such an early stage. So my thoughts are with Ineke and Robert, his family, his immediate family, with his friends in the VVD, with our friends here in the ALDE, but also with our liberal friends around the world. Okay, these would be my thoughts that I would share about Hans. I could go on and on and on, but I think we want to come to what also was his passion, the future of Europe from a liberal perspective, which is what we have gathered here for.
No, thank you very much. Those were very, very moving remarks. Ms. Varsmans, I believe you also wanted to say a few words.
Well, very short, because I think my colleague Alexander said already a lot of very nice words. I will always remember Hans as one of the liberals who really fought for a more liberal world. Like Alexander said, he was always working. He was never tireless of convincing people of the liberalism. And what I will remember of Hans is his humor. He was always laughing. He was always in for a good thought. And every time, I will promise you, every time that I will drink a good glass of red wine in the future, I will think of Hans. Because Hans was really born to change the world, and he changed all our lives. I can honestly say that since I heard of his death, I really am emotional, because he was a good colleague, but he was a friend. and he will be missed around the world, like Alexander said. He changed a lot of lives. He changed because he was always open for a good conversation. He was always open to listen. He was always open for a joke, but he was always open to fight for liberalism. And honestly, I hope that his family will remember this, because he will be missed by us, but of course he will be missed especially by his wife and his son. So I want to thank, because for me it was difficult today of this seminar, because I was used to see Hans on these kinds of meetings. So today I will tell Hans, Hans, we really love you, you will be missed, but we will continue fighting for liberalism in your spirit every day of our life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Again, this is almost choking me up. Ms. Asanova, please.
Thank you very much. Please do refer to me as Antoinette. It's something I shared soon after I learned the news. There was my first memory from my first ex officio presence at an ALDE party meeting when I was elected as president for LYMEC. We were having this meeting of the ALDE party, and I was super nervous because it was my first time with playing ball with the grown-ups, so to say. And I was referring to everybody with Mr. Van Balen, Mr. Lambsdorff, Mr. this, Mr. that, or Mrs. And at some point he just interrupted me and said, "Dear Antoinette, please, we're all equals here. So I'm Hans. We stand at the same floor." And that was something he was doing for the youth always. I clearly remember at the last physical congress, at the ALDE Congress in Athens, when he got re-elected, he was running unopposed. And yet when we asked from LYMEC to hold a meeting with him and ask him some questions as a candidate, he put a full hour for us to answer our questions. Even though we had not that many votes as other delegations, he insisted that the voice of the youth has to be heard, has to be reflected, and has to be taken into account. And this is something that I cannot stress enough. He really cared about what the young people have to say. And my presence today at this event, where we were supposed to debate together what the Conference for the Future of Europe would entail, is a very clear example of this, because he didn't invite a commissioner or someone from the council, or even a young MEP from the group. He wanted to know the voice of the youth organization that belongs to the ALDE party, as the organization that brings together the voices of young people all around Europe. And for that, I'm always grateful. He used to say always, liberals must unite. And I think at the wake of his loss, this is exactly what we have to do. Liberals all over and all structures. We need to work for this conference because he believed in it.
Thank you. And something else that he always used to say was, let's go forward together. So let's go forward together. But let's first pay 1 minute of silence in Hans's contribution. And Daniela, if you don't mind sharing the photo now as well of Hans, and then I'll start the timer. So 1 minute of silence for ALDE Party President, Mr. Hans van Balen. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for participating in this. And again, thank you to all our speakers as well for your very kind and very thoughtful words. Now, with that, as said, let's move forward together. So, and also in Hans's spirit, I'm going to use your first name as well. So Alexander, please, if you would kick us off just to share at your high level your introductory remarks on the future of Europe, please.
Okay, thank you very much. It's an all-encompassing topic, and I have been given 2 to 3 minutes to deal with it. So what I will do, Kate, if you agree, is I will sketch some broad lines, some broad strokes, and then in the Q&A, we will follow up, I think, on those issues that Hilde, that Antoinetta bring as well, and which interest our audience mostly. First of all, I think my personal conviction is we as Europeans have a particular European way of life, a way of living that we should be conscious of, and that we have developed over the last decades, and that has a value, that's something really, truly valuable. It's based, and that is the important thing, the important contribution that we as liberals have made and continue to make. It's based on the notion of liberty. It is based on individual liberty, it's based on tolerance, it's based on non-discrimination, it's based on diversity. That is the basis of our European way of life. We then have the market economy, we have the rule of law. We in Europe value social cohesion. We value environmental protection and protecting the climate. We know that our challenges lie in the green and digital transformation, because of course our economy right now as it is not very, very sustainable. As Europeans also, we have to be open-hearted, open-minded, but we also have to have an open perspective towards our neighborhood, Southeastern Europe, for example, a region that has European aspirations, but has a very difficult political present. So I think our European way of life, this really particular way of living that distinguishes us from all other regions of the world, is something that I think the Conference on the Future of Europe should bear in mind when it drafts this policy or that policy. And I say this very consciously, in making reference to, as we all know, the American way of life. Their notion of liberty is they're based on liberty as well, but their way of life is different. So is the Australian way of life, so is the Japanese way of life. They are our fellow democracies, our fellow our friends who have constitutions and societies who cherish liberty, but their way of life is different. So there is a particular European way of life, but it must never be exclusive. It must never be a way of life that excludes people, but that is tolerant and brings people together. That's number one. Number two, I have 3 big lines. One is a better and leaner European Union. That's the institutional setup. Does the Council work well? I don't think so. Should the Commission be reformed? I do think so. Should the European Parliament be strengthened? Yes, definitely. Hilde is in wild agreement. I think we all are. So we have the better and leaner European Union as a system of governance. That's number one. Number two, we need a stronger European Union. We need a European Union that speaks with one voice. I know, coming from the field professionally and politically, how difficult it is, but I want a European identity in our foreign policy. I think it's absolutely crucial when we have this fine line between enlargement and neighborhood and foreign policy. It's very clear that we must have a European approach to regions like the Sahel, like the Middle East, Eastern Europe. What about our friends in Georgia, in Ukraine? I mean, these are people who also have aspirations. Maybe not all of them are liable are eligible for enlargement anytime soon, but we have to respect their ambitions and their aspirations, and we have to support them coming from a European perspective. And there again, our way of doing it, our instruments are not yet what they should be. Unanimity in the Council on Foreign Policy, a rather weak European External Action Service, turf wars between the Council and the Commission, as we could all see in Ankara on the occasion of Sofagate. We have all these things that we can work on. And my last point, better, leaner EU, stronger EU, is a competitive and dynamic EU. Competitive means we have to get the single market together. We have to ensure competition. I'm very proud that we have Margrethe Vestager from our ranks, who really sees to it that competition, even in the digital era, is respected. Because without competition, we will lose our leading position in the world. We will lose the capability to produce the welfare, the level of welfare that our people need for social redistribution, for culture, for all the things that we cherish here in Europe. And that also brings me to the green transformation. We have signed up to the Paris Climate Agreement. We must respect it, and we must develop policies that respect it. But at the same time, and that's important to me, we must manage that transition without losing the support of broad swathes of the population. To me, it was a really big surprise when analyzing the yellow vest demonstrations in France, that the initial spark that set them off, was environmental decisions, was decisions that were tried to move France forward towards the Paris Climate Agreement. We must do it in a way that respects and reflects the preferences of society as a whole. We cannot do it in a way that sort of stretches people too thinly. And so I think the economic and the ecological need to be thought together. And I think that's a particular responsibility of liberals, something that we should bring to the conference on the future of Europe.
Thank you, Alexander. I'm going to go straight to you, Hilde, to hear
thank you very much.
Any additional thoughts?
Yeah, we see the timeline ticking, so we should be short, I think, because to listen to the people who are following. I'm very honored to be participating here today in this ALDE seminar, of course. And as you know, I'm joining you today as the president of the board of directors of the European Liberal Forum and as a member of the European Parliament. And for those of you who might not know this already, the European Liberal Forum is the official political foundation and think tank of the ALDE party. Together with 46 member organizations, we work all over Europe to bring new ideas into the political debate, to provide a platform for discussion and to empower citizens to make their voices heard. And so for me, it's really thrilling that Sunday, the conference on the future of Europe will finally start, because as you all know, it was meant to start a year ago. And of course, due to the conflict of some institutions, we must admit that, also the corona, of course, it was delayed for a year, but also because they were afraid of who was leading the conference on the future of Europe. And it were the liberals who pushed for this conference, because as you know, our name here in the parliament is Renew Europe. So for us, it's very clear. We are convinced Europeans, but we're not in love with Europe as it is. We want to change Europe, make it more adaptable for the people of Europe. So for me, the conference is my liberal child. It's born thanks to our efforts. And so Guy Verhofstadt, and I'm a Belgian citizen, of course, so for me, he is the best liberal all over the world. He will be leading this conference. So for me, I'm very sure that it will be a success, because Guy will push for it. He will not let it be like a PR stunt. And what are the questions that citizens may ask? Everything, if you ask me. There are no taboos. Let them discuss about a smaller commission. Let them discuss about an own budget. Let them discuss about a European army, Alexander. You know, it's my wet dream. I really want to have a European army. And I want it tomorrow, not the day after. Let that be clear. So let them debate about migration. Let them debate about, maybe we can elect the president of the commission in all countries together. Why not? Why not? So for me, everything can be debated. And of course, I even think with two recent events, we should debate everything. First of all, the Brexit. How can a country leave our project? We should ask ourselves that question. That means that we don't sell the project well, and that if we don't change the project, maybe it can be something in the history books after all. So we should defend Europe more and change it more. And secondly, the corona crisis. I think we also have seen, when a pandemic like that happens to us, a country can't do it by itself. It is Europe. People ask me, where is Europe? Well, we don't have the competences to do something, so we can't act. We did a lot. Did we do enough? No, not at all. We let people die in Italy because the hospitals were full. Where is the European spirit in all that? So let us debate the future of Europe open, without taboos. Give us your ideas. Let the voices heard, especially from the young people. I really hope that all the young people, because the future is theirs. So we should fight for a more liberal, more democratic Europe in the future for all our citizens and for all the youngsters. So open up the debate, and I'm open to listen to all your very good ideas. And Guy Verhofstadt is just the office next to me. So if you talk loud enough, he can hear them already. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hilde. And I think that was a very good segue as well to go to Antoinette to hear the young voice.
Thank you very much. I think what is important for young people when it comes to this truly very important democratic exercise is to have inspiration and ambition. And that is why throughout this past difficult year, we at the European Liberal Youth Organization, as the youth organization of the ALDE party, didn't sit around idle, but a year ago we created our own platform for discussion and coming up with ideas and compromise solutions on what we want to see out of this conference for the future of Europe. Because let's not fool each other, there is probably 50 shades of liberalism. There is different ideas flying around, but there are core ideas that we can all agree on, at least within the youth. So at our last two congresses, as a result of this true exercise of listening to each other and mutual understanding and compromise building, not very easy always, we adopted a paper on the institutional reforms we want to see, and then we adopted our vision on the priorities we want to have. And of course, there is a lot that Alexander already mentioned about the global role of the European Union, about reforming the Commission, giving more powers to the Parliament, turning it into a real Parliament as the national ones. Some thoughts on how to make Council work better, the Court of Justice, and so on. Of course, a lot on digital transition, which is important for us. On empowering youth, on fighting climate change and tackling environmental challenges. And I do encourage all of you who are interested to go to our webpage, LYMEC.eu, and take a look at our compromise positions that we've adopted. But why I said inspiration and ambition is because a lot of the young people feel that change is needed, and it's a natural turn of events, and we shouldn't fear it, but are not particularly sure what exactly needs changing. That is why we came up with those compromise positions, to give an inspiration to young people all over Europe to use the digital platform and give those suggestions, explaining why we think each of them is to take place. And why we need ambition is because after all these voices are heard, if the Conference for the Future of Europe doesn't bring something more concrete, not just a paper to be put on a shelf together with all the other European papers with good ideas, but something concrete to change and transform the way we work in Europe, then this will be a disappointment to everybody. So what we would be insisting is really this, to give inspiration to the European citizens, because they might not know that they want treaty change, but in the end, that might be the effect that they want to get. And also the ambition to really not be afraid of those changes.
Thank you. I would venture so far as to say that we won't just be disappointed, citizens won't just be disappointed, but it's going to massively backfire and undermine the European project, actually, if we launch this whole thing and nothing comes of it. So I think we'll open it up now to questions. And I see that there are a few already popping up in the chat. Daniela will kindly filter them, and I will share the questions. Whilst we wait for some live questions to be coming in, there were one or two themes that I would like to pick up on, also because actually they do link very strongly to some of the pre-submitted questions that we got ahead of the event. And I think one really goes to what you were all mentioning in terms of, one, there has to be no taboos, right? Let's not write off already, like the member states saying, oh, well, we can't discuss treaty changes because we don't want this to be another EU sort of constitutional debate. That's not what the citizens care about. Okay, fair enough, but let's look at the substance, and if it results in treaty change, then that's what we should discuss. Let's discuss the institutional reform, the composition of the European Commission. It's not a new debate. I worked as a parliamentary assistant in the European Parliament when Alexander was an MEP, right? And we had the discussion then as well. And I'm sure that it was happening even before then. So my question, and I'd be keen to hear all of yours, and the question as well that was submitted by the audience ahead of the event. How do we make sure that this time it's different? Like, how do we actually get the member states to agree, right? Because again, these are not new debates. A lot of these solutions have already been discussed and been on the table for many years. How do we overcome that hurdle that is frankly speaking, the member states? I don't know who would like to start, but I would say just take the microphone, and whoever wants to kick it off, or raise. You can also use the raise your hand button in Zoom.
I can say a few words, and I'd be interested to hear from Antoinette and Hilde, because my idea is we can make it different if we make it truly European, in the sense that we take the debates that we have to national capitals as well. I was in the European Parliament, Kate, you know that, for 13 years. I've now been in Berlin in the German Parliament for 3.5. And my experience is that the EU, particularly the EU institutions, to many people here seem to be located on a different planet, which of course is nonsense. Because whenever you approach a particularly important political topic, sooner or later it turns out, well, actually all we're doing here in the German Parliament is transposing European legislation into European law. It happens time and again, but still people are so busy, like in a beehive, running around and looking only at the national dimension, that I would say ALDE should make an effort really to take this to national capitals, to have events there, to invite the media, to create an interest for the conference in national capitals. Because your observation is completely right. Member states, and when we say member states, we're talking about the national fonctionnaire, essentially, think they can get away with yet another, event that does not yield any consequential results. I think we should not miss that opportunity. We have about 1 year, and we should use it. But for that, we need to have it. Yes, the Europe experts in Brussels need to be there, but I think national capitals count as well.
Hilde, Antoinette, any comments?
No, I think Alexander is right. I think we should convince the citizens now to participate in this, because what Alexander said is right. A lot of people don't even know what Europe is doing, because if it's a good law that's coming from Europe, it's a national politician who makes it. That's the way we do it. And when it's a bad law, and you have to vote it in the national parliament, then you say, but it's a fault of Europe. We can't handle it. It's Europe. So Europe is always the bad guy in all this, because when it's something good, then it's the national politicians who do that. And Alexander, I was in a national parliament before. I know, because I did it myself like that. So it's always Europe who is playing the bad guy, and that should stay. That should change. I think we should be more proud of what Europe is doing. But of course, renew Europe. That's for me always the baseline.
And I think this links very well as well to what you're all saying. How do we create these institutional structures where you have the transparency? Because as you're saying, Hilde, we have Brexit, we have Corona, where it's both, right? It's both that there are some competences that are lacking, but and probably in particular in terms of Brexit. It's also because we haven't solved Europe well enough, because there is still this firewall between the national level and the European level, where national politicians can get away with that line. Oh, it's Europe's fault. So I think that's also one thing where having these kind of concrete proposals, how do we actually involve, for instance, maybe the national parliament? That was another question that we got, and Alexander, now that you're sitting in a national parliament, and you did before, how do we do that more concretely? How can you actually involve the national parliaments? Do you think that could be a solution? Or how else do we break down? Don't get me wrong, we love firewalls when we talk about cybersecurity, but from this perspective, we don't want firewalls. How do we break it down?
I don't honestly know if I want to bring in more national politics in the European Parliament. I want to bring more Europe in the parliaments. I want to bring more the European Parliament in the national parliaments, because here even the debates in the plenary in the European Parliament, when it's really at stake, you see at the votes that people vote like their country and not vote always in the interest of Europe. And so what I really want is that we have a more convinced European reflection with all the parliamentarians. I really hope that the Conference on the Future of Europe will bring more competences to Europe, that we don't always need to go back to all the countries to vote things that are in the European interest. And secondly, I don't know how many years it was ago that Kissinger asked already, I don't know who to call when I want to call Europe. And I think it was also Alexander who referred to the Sofagate. Well, the Sofagate was very clearly Erdogan, who really wanted to play with the two institutions who were there, and who really wanted to give a signal against the woman. But it was also clearly that the two institutions are fighting